This week marks 6 months since the war in Ukraine began, and hopes for an end seems dim as attacks continue. On Wednesday, President Zelensky said a Russian missile attack killed 22 people at a Ukraine train station. On Thursday, he talked with President Biden about concerns over Ukraine's besieged nuclear plant in the southeast, the largest in Europe. A team of international experts could visit the plant as early as next week amid fears of a nuclear accident. Meanwhile, U.S. support is growing with an aid package of nearly $3 billion in military security assistance for Ukraine. Joining me now is the host of Velshi on MSNBC, my buddy, Ali Velshi, who spent many days covering the war in Ukraine. And Ali, I have to tell you, this is a special request to have you on to talk about this, because I wanted to reflect back to earlier times in this war and your experience on the ground in Ukraine. What was that like? And what did the Russia's invasion reveal about the nature of authoritarianism to you?
Well, it was really instructive, Michael, to me, because I realized a few things. In watching and covering that war, we learned so much about things that are going on in the world. And we realized that authoritarianism is taking grip around the world. And many of us in America associate the idea of voting and having elections as freedom and democracy. But in fact, Russia has elections. They're not free elections, but they have elections. They have a censored press. And what you saw in Ukraine, a country that, by the way, most people would have had trouble finding on a map. It's not on a lot of people's bucket list to go to and to visit, was a country in which they were fighting for their democracy. Someone else decided they shouldn't have it. It was supposed to end, as you recall, in somewhere between 3 days and a week from Russia's calculations, and Western intelligence believed that. And those people, led by Volodymyr Zelensky, whom a lot of Ukrainians, let alone the rest of the world, didn't think were up to the job, have organized not just a resistance, but a global awakening to the dangers of depleting democracy around the world. It made me think as much about authoritarianism and democracy around the world as it made me think about America, to say, we've got it. We've still got the vote. We've still got democracy here. We have authoritarian tendencies here. Let's make sure that this kind of thing stops. And if we as a world can make it stop in Ukraine, or at least help the Ukrainians stop this, maybe there's hope for the rest of us in spreading democracy rather than seeing it erode.
One of the aspects of your on-the-ground coverage, which was so compelling for me personally, as I'm sure it was for a lot of people, was the human element, that the Ukrainian citizen that you touched and spoke to and really sort of revealed to the rest of us, the rest of the world, the human aspect, the human toll and the cost to those citizens. What do you think their perspective of the Ukrainian citizens is today? How has it changed over the 6 months since you were there?
Well, what talking to Ukrainians did, I think, for our audience is it takes war out of the abstract, right? War is still an abstraction. It's maps, it's NATO, it's things like that. And talking to Ukrainians brought it out of the abstraction for our viewers. But I think the opposite was true. I think Ukrainians learned that the world cares about them, that the world cares about democracy. Remember in the early days, they were asking for help, and over again, it may not be what everybody in Ukraine wanted, but they got it. They got Europe to sanction Russia on oil. They got the world to give them weaponry. They, again, did not get everything they wanted, but even just this last week, a new package of U.S. aid is going to Ukraine. So I think it did help for those people who understood they're in a war with a much bigger country, with a much bigger army, with a country that has the ability to conscript people. Their fight for democracy, even if it ended in their death, was going to be worthwhile, and that they had people on their side. I remember after the massacre in Bucha, talking to Ukrainians and asking and trying to figure out how sad and how affected they were. And they said, we will grieve later. We will grieve for years, for decades. But right now we fight. And the connection between the Ukrainian people whom we met and the support that they got from overseas is why we're still talking about this war 6 months from now. It's not good that it's still going on, but there's nobody who thought Russia wouldn't have taken over Ukraine in 6 months, and Russia is not going to get Ukraine. They may still get those two provinces that they wanted, but they're not getting the country.
So, Ali, we've got about a minute left, and you just touched on a point that I think it's important to sort of expand on, and because the war in Ukraine has kind of slipped from the headlines these days. So in the time we got left, remind people why the world needs to keep paying attention to this, why it's still very important what's happening there.
Whether it's that or it's Afghanistan or it's the Syrians who we've entirely forgotten about or the Yemenis or the Rohingya. Everybody puts their pants on one leg at a time. And what this did teach us is that instinct for self-preservation, that instinct for self-determination, and that instinct for choice, which we in America call democracy, is something that is alive in everyone. But, Michael, I'll end it this way. Democracy is like a cactus. It doesn't need a ton of work, but it needs something. Once in a while, it needs a little water. And that's what we have to think about in America, in our own democracy, about nurturing it and in making sure that we're doing the right thing around the world in nurturing people's determination to control their own outcomes.
And like a cactus, it can be a little bit prickly at times,
yeah, that's right.
as we know. Thank you, my friend Ali Velshi. Really appreciate you.
Thanks, buddy.
Coming up, the growing fallout over the documents seized from Mar-a-Lago. Intelligence officials want to know if national security has been put at risk. Also, Florida could once again be the center of the political universe with a marquee Senate and gubernatorial race, and the Gen Z candidate poised to shake up Congress. All of that and much more coming up in the next hour of The Sunday Show.